Love it or hate it, AI is here to stay. And in this episode of the Potentialized podcast, I talk to a man who has a particular take on this new technology. Brooks Cole likens AI to a dragon and believes that we should learn to ride the dragon. So, buckle up and prepare to dive into this episode and tame your dragon.
Welcome to Self-Leadership to Potentialize with Andrew Bryant. We'll explore the power of potential and the promise of self-leadership. Join Andrew, a global leadership expert and author, as he shares insights, strategies, and stories spanning 25 years and 40 countries. Together, we'll unlock what makes us human, harness technology wisely, and step boldly into the future of leadership.
So, Brooks Cole, it is an absolute pleasure to be chatting to you about a topic that is very close to my heart, which is potential. And I know that you have insights and ideas, particularly with your experience. But first, for the audience to understand where you're coming from, what's the story that's not on your website that tells us who is Brooks Cole and what drives you, what motivates you?
So I was born in Colorado, of all places, and I attended the University of Denver, and I spent the first 30 years of my life in Colorado, first under the roof of my fundamentalist Baptist father and his wife. And then when I finally got out into college on a full ride scholarship, I had the opportunity to really stretch my legs and explore what I was interested into beyond this sort of the cocoon of religion and so forth. And what happened is I immediately launched into the exploration of consciousness. I was in marketing. I was there to study marketing, but marketing in 1979, 80 was just boring and horrible. And it was more like Mad Men with a bar in the office, but not a whole lot of accountability. And now fast forward to the present, marketing has become this incredibly data-driven science with extraordinary real-time accountability. Very, very different, would have been different. So I was bored at the time, and instead of focusing on my marketing studies, I was primarily interested in philosophy and in design. I basically had been the guy who painted the murals on the high school walls, and I was the editor-in-chief of the yearbook, and I was a self-trained artist, but I was also interested in mnemonics, in memory, in reverie. I was a good student. I knew how to remember things. And so my focus was on what is the nature of our relationship to reality? How do we know what we know? And so philosophy became my absolute favorite subject. And then fast forward to now, I started my first company at my design firm in my dorm room. And I never worked for anybody else ever again, other than I was the agency guy. And I combined these two subjects, which are near and dear to my heart, especially now with respect to AI, that philosophy of consciousness, understanding how do we know what we know and why are we here and what is our potency, combined with how do we communicate to other people in ways that grip them with brands and with ideas and messages. And these things are inextricably bound in my idea.
Well, that is an interesting formative journey. And as you know, in my work in self-leadership, it all starts with self-awareness, and that coming out of the framing of our early experiences, our early education, and asking that question, what's important to me? Who am I? What am I about? And the fact that you just landed straight on consciousness at university, when a lot of people are trying to get unconscious, is a great start. And you and I share a love of philosophy, the exploration of why things are, and is brilliant. And combining that with marketing, particularly today, as you say, marketing has evolved with psychology and philosophy to really understand the human needs, wants, desires, and to communicate to that. Have I summarized that journey to your positioning, or did I miss something?
No, absolutely so. So what is so potent about branding and marketing is that when you talk about consciousness, you're really, if you are a proper marketer and you're brilliant at it, you're really trying to get inside the consciousness of your prospect. You're trying to understand their motivations, their fears, their aspirations, etc. And the better you understand what they want, the more successful you'll be in product development and marketing and so forth. But you also, as a leader and as a brander doing anything in business, you need to know yourself, and you need to understand the extent to which your own setting of consciousness is actually occluding your ability to be able to see through the eyes of others. So the ability to really literally like almost transport your consciousness into the mind of your customer is an incredibly important modern requirement. It's always been the case, but now with tools like AI and these modern branding tools, the ability to understand who's in there and to read people from the way they express themselves, from the sentiment analysis of what they're saying in social media, from everything all the digital signals you can pick up, you now have an almost like a psychic MRI into the consciousness of the people that you're trying to reach.
Wow. Okay. Psychic MRI. I use a much more simple analogy than that. I use SSID, as in Wi-Fi signal. I believe we're all broadcasting. Connect with me. Connect with me. Now there is a password, but I'll tell you the password if you're nice to me, right? So yeah, psychic MRI. I'll pick up on that. And you also took me back, I mean, with your Colorado, background to a little bit further south, which is, Zig Ziglar saying, if you can help people get what they want, you can have anything in life that you want. So it really is that fundamental of understanding ourselves, understanding other people. And then for me, that's a collaboration. Sales or marketing for me is not a negative. It has negative connotations when it's connected with manipulation. But when we're serving the needs, wants, beliefs of stakeholders, our target audience, then surely we are, as you say, being potent, and that leads to potential, correct?
Well, so now in this day and age, marketers think of long-term customer value. So you can have short wins by deceiving people, but you don't have long-term customer value when you're not really authentically serving a customer. And the company, the brands that build themselves and become greater and greater and greater do so because they are in complete integrity and complete natural value connection with their customers. So I say it kind of resolves itself after a while. But the thing I'd like to call attention to, especially across the potency, this potential of self-leadership and knowing thyself and then being able to serve another, is you have to be able to have this almost like mirror-like understanding of the ability to really get who's out there and what they need, and to feel that, not just to know it sort of with the conscious mind, but to deeply intuit the why of their buying, which is justified, as we know, with the mind, but in reality, these buying decisions are made with emotions and with the heart and with the gut. So a skillful marketer knows themselves and knows the other, and you have this. This is the essence of my work around AI and consciousness. It's a bubble. We see the world through a bubble of reality. And if we're good at communication and marketing and leadership, we appreciate the bubble of reality that the other inhabits, and we're able to transmit our communications and connect with wisdom and compassion to what it feels like to be in there on the receiving end of who we are.
Okay. So this brings to mind two gaps in our potential: the potential to know ourselves and the potential to know others, specifically our clients. So let's address the latter first, particularly as AI gives us new tools. It would be fair to say that all salespeople, marketing people leave money on the table because they fail in that potential to understand their client. Would you agree with that premise? So there's a loss. So the potential is to close that gap. Is we would if we have an idea, we conceptualize it. If we prioritize something, if we have a priority, we prioritize it. And of course, if we take our potential and execute it, we potentialize. So how do you think about helping people using the tools that you've explored and your own experience? How do you help them improve their potential to understand their clients? How do you go about identifying the potential gap, and closing it?
Well, so especially with AI, I mean, we can't make the mistake that this whole process of sales and knowing thyself, knowing the customer was born yesterday just because AI seems to be coming wheeling in. But it has augmented dramatically the amount of information we have at our fingertips to be able to understand buying behavior. Famously, Google, I mean, one of the reasons why Google has been so powerful is because a search is an expression of intent to buy or intent to know. So it's in effect kind of like people famously, will tell Google things they don't tell their spouse. But what is interesting about AI is you tell AI things you wouldn't tell Google. And Google's still on the back foot trying to figure out what that means. I would say that what is happening now.
Sorry, I hate to interrupt, but I mean that's surprising to me, and I'd love you to give me a concrete example. If what am I saying to AI that I'm not saying to Google? It could be me, it could be anybody. What's a concrete example of the difference between those two?
So there's like two kinds of people. You know my allusion to AI as a dragon. That all cultures have had dragons.
For the audience, we need to say, you talk about it as riding the dragon. Is that correct?
I do. Well, what I really say is that all cultures throughout history have had dragons. And dragons are sort of at the low level misunderstood as just sort of embodiments of evil. But what dragons really are is unrealized potential emanating from the sort of the human basis of the very force that brings human life into existence. So in other words, it's our unknown selves, unresolved, unknown selves that we fear, that are unintegrated. So this is what AI is. AI is trained. It's not a robot. It's not alien to us. It's actually trained on human expression, more human expression than any single human has the opportunity to gain by themselves. So it's like a walking library of Alexandria available to any of us. But there's kind of two types of people that interact with AI. There's people who are fundamentally either ignorant or afraid of it. And there's others who are actually leaning in and willing to embrace it. And when you embrace it, you can tune AI. For example, with OpenAI, ChatGPT, most people don't use what are called custom instructions. But when you use custom instructions and you basically tell ChatGPT who you are, what you're after, what your aspirations are, what your businesses are about, you literally load it up with extreme intimate knowledge of who you are and why you're asking these questions. All of a sudden, the model comes alive and begins to be intuitive, and it anticipates where you're going with any given query. Google has never done that. You ask Google a question, and it gives you this stack of the blue links. It gives you this stack of homework to go explore. What AI does is it gives you insight and conversation and answers. If you use Perplexity instead of Google, you find this to be true.
So the analogy is AI wants to get to know you, or if you let it, you will share it. It's like a first and second date. Here's who I am. Here's what I like. Here's what I dislike. And then the responses are relevant to that versus a broadcast, which is what Google is. Is that?
Yes.
Yes, and.
Yeah, and we have to go beyond, because for 25 years we've been trained to ask Google a question and then get this thing that we've thought mistakenly is an answer, but what it is a bunch of homework to go find your answer. Here's a bunch of links. Right. It's like you ask somebody a question and they give you a stack of file folders and they say, knock yourself out. That's what Google has been all this time. Now it's very different. Now we're talking about actually not only answering questions, but exploring the possibilities and creating reports and structure and so forth. It's completely different. And yet people who are uninitiated equate the two. They just think, oh, it's another kind of search engine because it can answer questions. But it's so much more than that. Now, one thing I would like to explore with you, because I thought a lot about the relationship between AI and self-leadership, right? So up until now, self-leadership it's incumbent upon the individual to have a level of self-actualization and self-examination to actually, to critically examine your behavior and your inner workings in order to, perfect yourself and improve yourself in order to be equal to lead others. But what is interesting about AI is it has, because of the potential intimacy here, it has the opportunity to get in there with you and be part of your apparatus for self-leadership. In other words, we all have access. I ask Marcus Aurelius all sorts of questions about how I should do what I do. Marcus will answer in Marcus's tone. Seth Godin will answer in Seth's tone. And it's all in there as part of my inner workings of how do I lead myself now with an entourage of others.
Okay. So to put that in plain speak, not that you didn't, but so that I understand, getting AI to talk to me as if I'm a 5-year-old. One of my coaching clients yesterday said, "Well, what do you think of me?" And I, "Well, why do you need to know my perspective?" And they said, "Well, I need to understand how I'm being perceived with a new team." So, we have tools, we have psychometric tools we can measure, but he wanted my gut reaction of him. What you're saying is that to achieve our potential, we can go beyond asking 3 friends what you think about me, but you can ask, how am I perceived? How would I perceived through the eyes of a historical figure like Marcus Aurelius in terms of his writing, etc. So we have a better opportunity, or a more expanded opportunity, to get perspectives about how we are perceived that could be a blind spot to ourselves.
I think a wise AI would quote Wayne Dyer, who said, "Care not for the good opinion of others." Yeah. I think when you relieve yourself of the burden of caring about what other people think of you, then you begin to be self-actualized and take on authentic self-leadership.
Well, I absolutely agree with you. It is important to know how you're perceived, but whether you care about that or not, because as we know, people perceive us through their own filters and their own projections. So there's not a lot we can do about that. Just ask my sister. She has a whole list of my faults because we grew up together, right? And none of them I think are particularly valid, but it says a lot about herself, right? So I take that with a filter, but it is useful because we all have blind spots. You talked about dragons, which is interesting. There's another analogy with that. I think it was not Aristotle, Archimedes, who talked about his daemon, spelt Daemon, the Greek for inner spirit, which is an inner dragon, which of course gives us the word demonic, right? Daemon, demonic. So we all have that inner voice that says, this is who you are, or this is who you should be. And so some awareness around that so that we can moderate those inner voices is not just self-awareness, but it's moving then to self-actualization, as you say, choosing to be the person that you want to be rather than being reactive to some of that programming.
So here's what's interesting about that. The word daemon, as you spell it, has actually been active in computer science for quite some time. It's basically a self-possessed agent, if you will. But that was in the old days when agents were really programmed to do what they do. We are now at the threshold where we're coming from AI being a provider of language to now the next generation is going to be AI as agents and as automations. These are going to be things that actually can undertake their own choices and perform work on your behalf. And so they have a self-possession that's going to really change what they can do for us. They're going to be able to talk to us, and having passed the Turing test really already, they're going to be able to be mentors and guides and cheerleaders and critics and coaches and doctors and nurses. You may be aware that we've now surpassed the point where human radiologists are now routinely being outmaneuvered by AI radiologists who can find things that you are just not perceptible to the trained human eye. So the same thing metaphorically is possible with how we comport ourselves, what kind of leaders we are, who's in there. And to speak to your point about how we are perceived, clearly we have to be able to be well perceived and well regarded to be effective leaders. On the other hand, we have the opportunity to lead others to be more wise and go inside and be less judgmental and more self-aware in order to be better self-leaders. And AI can help us do that.
It can, but hence the fear. I mean, even in the languaging of calling them an agent. I mean, you engage an agent, but of course, I was deeply impacted by the 1999 movie The Matrix, and of course, Agent Smith was a somewhat malevolent agent, and so hence the fear. But just as you should be very selective about your coaches and mentors, I would imagine you would say, we need to be just as selective about the agents that we choose to support us with AI.
It's crucial that we be able to trust them, but the world is going to be filled with these things. And a lot of them are going to be working for other agendas that may be antagonistic to our self-interests. So there's going to be an arms race. But the part of this future that I'm excited about is the potential to have fiduciary agents that really do work for you and protect you, like a good knight, protects from other people's dragons. And I think that especially now that we have so much progress being made in open source AI, the original thought was the only AI that mattered were these giant foundation models that came from the giant tech companies, and everything else was unimportant. But it turns out that these open source AIs that 10-year-old kids are training on their MacBooks are going to be extremely potent and reliable and even usable without the internet. You're going to be able to actually have your own AIs working with what they know that don't have to be connected to or exploitable by the internet itself.
Right. So if we boil this down into some advice, and we could put this to ChatGPT or to Claude and say, what strategies should I use AI? What strategies should I engage AI to help me in my potential in terms of my own self-leadership and my ability to read and influence others? What might be? You've already said, you speak to AI and talk back to me as Marcus Aurelius. What would be the top three things for people to do in that case?
Well, the first thing I want to do to set this up, I think this word, this potentialize, and the conversation about potential, it is such a gem. It's such a Fabergé egg of possibility, because like AI, like anything really, there's kind of a lower octave way of appreciating it. Oh yeah, human potential. That just means what is possible for you. And that is the least interesting part of what potential actually means. I think potential really comes from the Latin potens, posse. Basically, it's power, and it's personal power and the ability to act. So this word, especially in the sense that it represents possible but yet unrealized power, unexecuted power. This is the absolute alchemical marriage of AI, because what AI is, it basically is waiting for us, like the photon that is completely free to decide when and where to effervesce, when and where to act. Potens, this is about freedom. This is about fundamental sovereignty of the individual. It's not just, oh, you could get a better job than you have. It's so much more than that. This is about every aspect of your life that could be improved. And so to answer your question, it's about professional potential, but it's about social potential and emotional potential and mental potential, relational, spiritual, environmental. It's the whole, what I refer to as full spectrum well-being of the person that can be served by this interaction. And in the end, it's the goal of having a full and happy life that is well-rounded in all the respects of the things that we might seek. That's what is possible in your potential here.
Yeah, I mean, the wheel of life that life coaches love to have. In fact, I was reading the biography of Arsen, who is the CEO of InDrive, who is a ride-sharing service that came out of Irkutsk in Eastern Russia and is now a tech unicorn. And, he talked about, his own personal development, and he drew a wheel, here's where I am, 0 to 10 on finances, and here I am on 0 to 10 on leadership, and here I am 0 to 10 on my health. And it's an old technique, but it's a good one to look at our potential in multiple facets, right? And get that feedback. Yeah.
think about, so this is what is new in this particular moment. If you think about the Apple Watch or the iPhone, the iPhone has an internal gyroscope that knows as you're walking down the street whether you're about to have a heart attack. How does it know? Because it knows the signature of the motion of someone who's losing control of their motility. It knows your heart rate. It knows whether you had enough sleep last night. It knows how many steps you've taken. Now, I mean, people can look at that and they can say that's kind of scary. This is the term of art for this is the quantified self. But if you have an Apple Watch, if you have this stuff, all of a sudden your personal electronics have so much information about your state. And if you extend this to the questions you're asking and the information that you seek, and you posit as Apple is trying to do, that you're going to have an internal universe of intelligence about who you are and what you're up to, then all of a sudden this potential can be extremely tuned and customized to who you are and what you need exactly in that moment. That means how are you showing up as a leader today may be based on how stressed out you are about your relationship, or the fact that your child is in the hospital, or about the fact that the company is about ready to, force you to fire a bunch of people, or whatever it is. That all these things that you're describing, the full spectrum quality of your being, are incredibly interdependent and important in ways that up until now, it's like, we don't want to hear about that. We just want the bottom line. You just, you do your job, hit your numbers. Those days are gone, because now we're hiring whole people. And ideally, we're developing and cultivating whole people. And we have more information about your level of wholeness than at any point in human history. So this is going to be a very different game.
It is. And I think it's been creeping up on us for a while. I love the concept of, quantifying self, because quantifying potential is, well, what is possible? That stupid thing that people say, oh, you're only using 1% of your brain, which to be able to say that, we would know what 100% is, and we don't. So it's a silly statistic. I mean, I stood on my electronic scales this morning and it said, you're a bit dehydrated. You need to drink 2 glasses of water, right? So, that's a very classic example. And, obviously, it measures my body fat and my weight. So we are much more three-dimensional. Getting that feedback of, you haven't had enough sleep. It's an element of biohacking. And I remember some years ago watching a science fiction movie, and I can't remember which one it was, but the guy gets up and passes urine, and then the thing just said, your sodium is too high, and stop eating, no bacon for you at the canteen. And so there's going to be some pushback about that. I mean, these people who say, well, freedom and privacy, etc. But if you embrace this as information that you want to use to be the best version of yourself, then it is sovereignty. And if you want to ignore the information, you choose to ignore the information, right?
And remember that we are going to have the opportunity to have this information delivered to us in the personality that best serves us. So it's not like some nagging, like digital reportage. It could be a soft, sweet, feminine voice that says, sweetheart, you probably shouldn't have bacon at the canteen.
Yeah, my wife's going to have an issue if I start having that voice talk to me in the morning. But yes, I very much get your point that we can take feedback in different ways from different people. So yeah, I think it's the personalization of this. This requires a level of ownership to step up. I mean, even to, adjusting the desktop on your personal computer to the colors you want, right? Sometimes if you've ever used somebody else's computer, how the bleep do you use this? It's not organized. You can't be productive on this thing. I know, because, I've been, I was the tech guy for my company, right? When I first started my small consulting firm, I was the one that checked everybody's computers. And I'm like, this is a job I need to stop doing. But initially I was like, how can you work like this? I think this resonates with you, does it?
Oh,
I saw your
quite.
face.
Well, there's if we fast forward to where this is going to get really interesting. So one of the businesses that I'm involved in now has to do with kind of like a holodeck for leaders. Basically, the opportunity to because you cannot step up to a whiteboard and explain using graphs what it's like to ride in a roller coaster. It's like you can do that, but it's ridiculous because you once you get in the roller coaster, you realize this is an embodied feeling. You can't give somebody videos about how you negotiate or how what to do about when some underling is screaming at you and accusing you of, threatening to sue you if you fire them for incompetence, right? Because all of a sudden, the moment this happens, your amygdala is invoked, your biochemistry is changing, you're in a defensive posture. It's a very different thing to actually be in the experience of leading when you're leading from it's like neuro leadership, your whole body is invoked. So we need the opportunity to be able to practice having difficult conversations with full immersive experience. And that's going to change the leadership education. In my opinion, that's one of the ways that we're planning on using AI.
No, you're spot on with that. And having been involved in executive and leadership development for 25 years, one of the most effective predictors was the assessment center, where you put a leader in a situation with an ambiguous task and you observe their behavior. And people can say, oh yes, I'm a proactive problem solver, and then you put them in an assessment center and give them a problem, and either you see them step up or you see them go to pieces. And you can't hide the behavior. And a few years ago, I was a keynote speaker in Singapore at a tech conference, and they took me to the exhibition area and put on the VR goggles for training firefighters to go into the because you can say, well, this is what you do when the plane catches fire. You run up with the hose, but suddenly feeling that heat and seeing the three-dimensional and the sound and the overwhelm, it's the only way you're going to prepare the physiology to be calm in the face of danger, correct?
Absolutely so. And the company, is betting on your ability. And as you know, you probably agree with me, this like the single most important attribute of a leader is emotional maturity. Because leaders, like, the issue is everybody looks great on their CV and so forth. But then when the shit hits the fan, and as it often does, which is precisely when a company needs you to be an incredibly strong and stabilizing force as a leader. When everyone else is losing their heads, you have to be able to be calm and to exude a sense of wisdom and compassion in a gale force wind of whatever the heck is going on and other people losing their stuff. And we need better ways to prepare people for those situations than just reading about the situation in some HBR article.
Yeah, that's certainly not learning. This is very exciting thing. So in terms of the dashboard that we can get for our physiology, emotional maturity, how do you rate your potential? Have you started, in developing these, are you getting some awareness of, well, I've developed my potential in this area, but I haven't in this area. Like, have you missed leg day and missed out on an area? So, a little bit of self-disclosure. How do you think about your own potential and using these tools to grow yourself?
Well, so I would say I believe that entrepreneurship is one of the most arduous spiritual journeys you can engage in, because it really causes you to evaluate just how strong you are when you have this dream, and then and all the different things you have to do as an entrepreneur. And I've failed twice at turning Holo into a startup, and now it's my third time. And at each point, I've managed to take stock of what I was good at and what I was not good at. I love the maxim in Silicon Valley, which is fail forward. Silicon Valley investors like to invest in entrepreneurs who have failed a few times and survived to tell the tale. Because if you haven't failed, you haven't been tested. and a lot of investments run aground on the fact that the founders are just not ready to deal with failure or challenge. That said, I've still got a lot to learn for just about, I'm quite the visionary type. I've been a visionary since I've been a young kid. Do not have a lot of leadership and management experience. I'm good at leading the vision. I'm not good at solving other people's problems. When I'm not good at conflict, for example, when people start to scream at each other in a room, my limbic system gets set off, and I have an aversion that I recognize is not a leadership skill. You have to be able to lean into a conflict situation as a leader and be equal to the task of achieving peace and harmony, even when people are really in their worst selves. I do not yet really have that skill, and I look forward to opportunities to master it better.
Well, good luck with that. And as you say, you can set up a holodeck to test yourself in that. But this is a question about potential. Do we have to have the potential in all areas, right? And as the African proverb goes, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Maybe that, one of the things that we've done in the past is sort of map teams. Yes, Google said we need psychological safety for effective teams, but also, we need people with different and complementary skill sets. Is most leaders aren't fully holistically all the way around. They got to the top because they did work one muscle really, really hard and got really good at it and then got elevated for that. They should expand their repertoire, but they're never going to have the time to work on all their weaknesses. So, part of the potential is to find complementary, help with that.
I'm reminded of this wonderful anecdote about Henry Ford being brought before Congress. And some senator is basically trying to embarrass Mr. Ford, who did not graduate from college. And he reminds the senator, I have a row of telephones on my desk, and I can call the best person in all of these domains at now. The transport this to now. And what is going to happen for all of us is we are all going to have not just an agent, but an army of agents, each of them trained in specific domains that are important to us. And each of us is going to have, for not a whole lot of expenditure, access to expertise that we could not have achieved in our own lifetimes. And these are going to be the money ones and the software writing ones, and basically everybody you need to run a business will have an agent that is ready to do work with the state of the art knowledge about what they need to do, and they'll be able to talk to each other, to check each other's work, and to work as a team. The future of leadership is going to include leading agents of AIs that are able to do this work for you.
So with that statement, I want to circle back to the bit that I said, let's look at potential of others, but the potential of self is in my work on self-leadership. I talk about agency, is that most people actually are not exercising agency. They're framed from birth and school, and they're a passenger in the driver of their life. So for us to lead agents, we ourselves have to step into the agency. This is the big call to action.
That's the most important aspect of it. So we're working on consciousness for AI. People assume often that means consciousness in the AI, but really what it means for me is stepping into the higher self of your own consciousness so that your big heart can be equal to the big brain of this technology that's going to be all around you. People are going to need to step up and become more human and more wise and more compassionate in order to be able to be equal to the task of managing this level of intellectual power that the AI represents.
Well, you and I are fully aligned on that. I saw only today that you liked a post I did a couple of days ago on what is success. And I defined it very much in heart aspects rather than financial ones. So the big challenge here then is developing people's humanity to match this. And I am with you on this, but at the same time concerned that we had an industrial revolution, agricultural revolution in the 1900s, and then an industrial revolution. The learning revolution that we have is there, but AI is outstripping human development. We are still operating with the same hardware that we had as hunter-gatherers. And here we are needing to evolve. So the potential here is I don't know the words, educating or equipping, or is people to have that big heart to match the big brain. Do you have any ideas about, from a global perspective or social perspective, what are we missing? What do we need to be doing more of?
Well, I think if you really look at the history of evolution, both sort of biological evolution, but also historical evolution, societal evolution, it isn't a smooth gradient. It's basically quantum leaps. When species or individuals come under extraordinary stress, there's a quantum leap that happens. And I think talking about potential, humans, as we can see, have the potential to do extraordinary things. We can, you can be 6 feet high and help create a skyscraper that's 1,000 feet tall, or write symphonies that stand the test of time, or create great literature or great art or great, whatever it is. The vast majority of people don't seem to have that capacity, but some do. And I think that this moment in human history is one of those moments where we're going to meet a challenge that's kind of like when the asteroid came wheeling in 65 million years ago and, made room for us because the dinosaurs were no longer, there. I think we have the potential for a brand new relationship to money, to value, to peace, to governance, to even to the use of science. But as you can see, we're really at this bifurcation moment. We've got the running and screaming, insane Armageddon channel, and then we have this extraordinary human potential channel. I vote for the latter. I think that a lot of what is making noise right now, it's the rattle of the engine that's about to fall apart. It's the giant, crusty, old dead trees that are about ready to collapse in the storm, then allowing the young seedlings to suddenly have light and to be able to grow. We're at a point in our human history where we can no longer, where a lot of this nonsense has done us all the good we can stand. And what we're really called into, one of the things I've so admired about you, that the thing that is going to be the greatest catalyst is for us to step into a level of quantum leap in our own personal responsibility for ourselves and for each other, and how we govern our lives, and how we make decisions, how we spend our money, how we elect our leaders, how we conduct our businesses. And I honestly think that we're ready for a real quantum leap with the augmentation of this kind of intelligence over here, that we can rise to a level of heart intelligence and gut intelligence that will be equal to the task.
Well, I buy into that vision. I hope that we are ready, and I hope we do get this quantum shift. Otherwise, as Yuval Harari wrote, I think in *Sapiens*, that otherwise, we're going to have a speciation where, we have a wealthy, intelligent class that do that, and then we have a grunt class, maybe, H.G. Wells and, the Morlocks living around.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Wow. So there's a cynical side of me that goes, sometimes people work, as you say, against their own best interest, and helping, a global raising of consciousness that we now have the technology to cure world hunger and to address climate change, but only if we, get over our pettiness and, as you say, have a new relationship to money and politics and leadership. So I think that is the big potential. And I think it's a good place to leave it hanging, because we're not going to answer all of those in another 5 minutes. But I absolutely thank you for your insights and some challenging ideas that I think for us to take agency and to lead agents is our call to action. So thank you so much, Brooks, for your time and for your knowledge and for your wisdom.
Well, best of luck with Potentialize. I would say that it's probably one of the most important missions to be on at this moment in time, is for all of us to really reach the quantum leap of our potential. I feel like the being born is a gift that comes with a requirement that we do something with that gift. That gift is our potential. So all of us should read your book and educate ourselves of how we can achieve our potential in our lives.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us on Self-Leadership to Potentialize with Andrew Bryant. If you're ready to be the driver of your life and not the passenger, keep exploring with us. Get your copy of Potentialize wherever good books are sold. For more resources or to book Andrew for coaching and speaking engagements, visit selfleadership.com. Until next time, think smart, lead better, and always potentialize your future.